What's going on, y'all? Myke C-Town here, and today I'm giving you a review of the newest album from the Halo Effect, entitled March of the Unheard.
Could we ever cross the line between the great divide that is the stop of failure burns?
So before I get into the album, please allow me to give you a little bit of context. I got into extreme metal back in high school, but it actually started out with black metal. I actually wasn't huge on death metal back in those days, with the exception of a few bands. But when I discovered melodic death metal, that's when my interests really took off. You know, I can still remember the very first time I heard At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul, and how that album blew me away. You know, that's the album that really started it all for me. I'd not heard anything like that. It was this perfect mix of death metal and the kind of fast type of hardcore that I really liked. So that kind of led me down the path of melodic death metal. So then I discovered bands like Edge of Sanity and Gates of Ishtar and Nightingales and Eucharist, etc., etc., etc. But it was two bands other than At the Gates that have my heart, and that is In Flames and Dark Tranquillity. I was obsessed with both of those bands to an insane degree, to where I was hunting down everything that both of those bands had done. You know, I listened to Jester Race and Horacle and The Gallery and Mind's Eye. Like, that was my shit. Fast forward some years down the line, and both bands changed their sound up a bit, but I still enjoyed what Dark Tranquillity was doing. Maybe not as much as the Mind's Eye or Projector, but it was still enjoyable for me. The same, unfortunately, can't be said for In Flames. I'm not here to badmouth or tear anybody apart or anything like that, but if I'm being honest, In Flames lost me after Clayman, which was the last album that I really enjoyed. The stuff after that was a bit too poppy for my taste, and it lacked the edge that the earlier albums had. I kind of think that the increased popularity of metalcore infected the melodic death metal genre as a whole, and a lot of bands started playing that style, and it just became watered down and stale. I could do a whole video on that, but who wants to listen to that? Fast forward again to about a month or so ago, and Marty from here at Heavy Metallurgy texted me to ask if I had checked out the new Halo Effect album, and I had not. So, before we get into the album, let's talk about who the Halo Effect is for those that are unfamiliar. It's Niclas, who was in Flames. Granted, this was during the era that I didn't really care for, but he was still in the band. He also had a band called Gardenian that was incredible. Then you have Mikael, who is a certified legend in this genre, having been in Flames at one time, but spending the majority of his career as the frontman of the incredible Dark Tranquillity. You have Peter, who was also in Flames towards the late 90s and early 2000s. Daniel, who was also in Flames around the same time as Peter. And then you have Jesper Strömblad, who is another certified legend in my book, an innovator of this music, also formerly of In Flames, but from way back in the beginning. And he was also in Ceremonial Oath, also Dimension Zero, both bands I loved. So yeah, this band is basically a supergroup of melodic death metal heroes. So I threw the album on in the car while taking a long drive, and I shit you not, I had the album turned up full blast, and when I looked down at the speedometer, I was going 90 miles an hour in a Honda Fit. Like, I could not process how good this album was. When it kicked off with Conspire to Deceive, I was like, okay, this sounds really clean, but I'm loving the melody. It takes me back to older In Flames, like Colony era In Flames. Amazing back and forth melodies between the guitarists. Mikael's voice sounds perfect. It still got that great amount of gruff to it, and he still has such amazing control over it. You know, it's nasty and rough, but he does this breathy thing that really sets his vocals apart.
Could have been no web of lies we see. One broken trust now shatter without a word. Weakest by a
Detonate kicks in and comes out the gate super hard. The way it starts reminds me a little bit of how Pinball Map starts, and that's a good thing because I love that song because it's nonstop melodious beauty. But what's so great about this is it's super melodic, but it's not wimpy. The production of the songs is really clean, but the material itself, the songs themselves are still super heavy and aggressive. And towards the beginning of the song, when Mikael is singing, "We just close our eyes and let the darkness take us," the riff behind that is absolutely infectious. And it leads straight into a beautiful hook. And what's so amazing about this song is they cram so many incredible riffs into this one song that I'm blown away because some bands can't get this many good riffs in an entire album.
We just close our eyes, let the darkness take us. We reach out to the inside.
Cruel Perception starts with a beautiful, catchy riff that almost gives like power metal vibes, but heavier, and this leads into a really nicely composed, clean moment. And this takes me back to something I would have heard on Dark Tranquillity's Projector, and it sounds fantastic. And I love how uplifting the music sounds until it gets to the lead that comes in around 3/4 of the way through the song. And there's something about it that sounds so soulful and almost sad. It makes me wish that I had the lyrics for the album so I could fully understand what the song is about, because this moment was so moving for me.
There is no time, a path that leads to nothing. There's a way, there is no time.
What We Become is a favorite of mine on this album. It starts with a very majestic Iron Maiden reminiscent riff that immediately caught my ears, but it didn't last that long before launching into a very heavy part with pounding drums that's about as moshy as this album gets. The song has a really interesting hook as well because I really love the effect that's on the guitars during the hook. It makes the guitar riff that they're playing almost sound like a keyboard. I love how the Curse of Silence gives us a small break with a clean but epic moment that gives me, this is going to sound crazy, but it gives me Manowar vibes. And all this is before launching into one of the singles from the album and the title track of the album, and also one of my favorite songs from the album, and that is the song March of the Unheard. This song absolutely kills. It has a perfect melody at the beginning, and the chords they're using during the verse, they're just so well written. It sounds perfect. Daniel has always been one of my favorite drummers when it comes to this kind of music because he has such a solid style of laying down beat backdrops that go so perfectly well with the riffs. From his choice of tempo to his fills, he's just great. And this song is a perfect example of why I feel that way, And this is, in my opinion, Mikael's best vocal performance on the whole album. There's so much drama and passion in his voice. Forever Astray made me so happy as the riff is just so insanely good. Like, this definitely calls back to Jester Race or Horacle era In Flames. And when I heard Mikael's cleans, I had goosebumps, because it took me back to Projector, which was the first time I heard just how great his cleans are. I mentioned his breathy, rough vocals, but his cleans are gorgeous. He has this this very deep baritone, almost gothy croon that just works so well with this music. And when he's going back and forth from the clean to the rough vocals so seamlessly, it's just really impressive. Like, I really think he is an underrated vocalist in this genre.
What we ask from one another, and in honesty we're lost without. It's not the light, it's truly the fire. We are led.
Now, not everything can be rainbows and sunshine, because it's after this song that I feel like the album has its first misstep, in my opinion. I didn't care for the song Between Directions at all. I thought this sounded like that later era of In Flames that kind of turned me off to later In Flames albums. I don't want to call it radio friendly, because what the hell does that even mean these days? I'll say it's a bit overly palatable, if that makes sense. I don't think it's badly written. I don't think it's badly played or badly performed. I just simply don't like this sound. It almost comes off a bit dry. I don't really feel any real passion in the songwriting on this song. But yeah, unfortunately, the next song, which is A Death That Becomes Us, it had the same issue for me. I just didn't care for the riffs in the song or the way they were being used here. I didn't dislike it as much as Between Directions, but it still didn't hit me as hard as the songs previous to those two did. But, you know, I do think it had a really good lead, though, so it's worth listening to for that. But yeah, I think the album finishes strong with the last two songs, though, because The Burning Point brings back those fast, bouncy riffs that brought a huge smile to my face for the first 3/4 of this album. And again, I think Mikael's vocal performance here is just fantastic. And closing the entire album out with the song Coda, which is a very symphonic song with some somber acoustic guitar and this beautiful string section. You know, the way the violin comes in over the guitar is just so good. It definitely takes me back to Jester Race, but more modernized, if that makes any sense. But yeah, overall, I absolutely loved this album. It is exactly what I would want from a melodic death metal album in 2024. You know, I'm getting aggression, I'm getting soul, I'm getting, you know, like I said, passion. I'm getting a lot of straight metal with no hardcore influences, or even any overbearing attempts at accessibility. You know, even with the two songs that I mentioned that I didn't really care for, this album is still an absolute banger. The songs that I love on the album are so good that I don't even skip over the few that I don't love, because I feel like I'm getting a calming moment before closing the album out on an extremely high point. And I know I've spoken a lot about how this album reminds me of older In Flames and older Dark Tranquillity material, but I don't want that to get mistaken. You know, I want to be clear that in no way am I suggesting that they're retreading old ground. You know, I'm not trying to imply that this is just a weird carbon copy of themselves from decades prior. That's not what I'm saying. What I mean is the album sounds like it has some riffs that they may have written back in those old days, but they are using them now to compose more modern songs. This album doesn't sound like it could have come out in the late 90s or the early aughts. It's clear that these are very modern songs written today, but they're modern songs with very clear nods to how the genre started, with very obvious elements of what originally made melodic death metal so special to dorks like me. If this came out in 2024, there is absolutely no question in my mind that this would be a top 5 album of the year for me. You know, fewer records have made me this happy in a very long time. You know, giving me back a sound that truly made me fall in love with metal in the late 90s, and having it be from a crew of purveyors who basically created this sound. I just could not be happier with this album. And yeah, I gotta thank, as always, Heavy Metallurgy for giving me the chance to hear this album early and giving me the opportunity to wax poetic about it. This album is incredible. If you are a fan of any of these bands, I absolutely implore you to take a listen. And of course, the comments are down there, so definitely let me know what you thought about it. But yeah, I'm excited to see if anything else that comes out this year can top this for me, because this is a weekly listen for me. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and thank you for sitting here listening to me ramble on about my love for melodic death metal and my love for this incredible album. And I will see you guys next time. All right, see ya.